our Sunday talk show, The World This Week. This time, this is a special edition, of course, due to the latest developments here in the Middle East. It's an extended edition with quite a few guests. We'll start with General Giora Island. Hello, thank you for joining us. Formerly the head of the National Security Council. We're, General, into the almost fourth day of invasion to Gaza, ground operation there. How do you see it at this stage?
What is happening during the ground operation is more or less what was expected, because it was clear that the friction will be higher. It would lead naturally to more casualties on the Palestinian side and unfortunately also on the Israeli side. The primary goal, as it was instructed by the Prime Minister, is to find the tunnels that actually lead to Israel and could pose a very dangerous threat to the existence of a lot of civilian settlements along the Israeli-Palestinian border there. This is the first goal, and I tend to believe that in short time the demolition of these tunnels will be achieved.
Do you believe this is achievable?
Yes, this is achievable because in the end of the day, these tunnels are close to the fence, close to the border. It is relatively easy to cope with them. But this is only one goal, and there is a much more ambitious goal, and this is to find where all the rockets are stored and where they manufacture them, and where is the arsenal, and where are the headquarters, where the leaders of Hamas are hiding. This is more complicated, more dangerous. It might take more time, but I believe that this is the second phase of this ground operation.
Today may be a key day where you have a lot of casualties on the Palestinian sides, you have casualties on the Israeli side piling up as well. How long could that go on without international intervention?
Well, international intervention in principle is not necessarily bad in this context, because Israel agreed at least twice to ceasefire, and it was rejected by the other side. So if the number of casualties on the Palestinian side seems to be unbearable to the international community, then they should force Hamas to accept more or less the conditions as they were proposed by the Egyptians about a week ago. And I believe that if such a proposal is presented again, the government of Israel will accept it.
Now, there's a little catch there, because if there's an immediate ceasefire, as the Egyptian propose, what happens next? I mean, what are the terms of this? This is unknown. What's going to happen next?
The concept of the Egyptian proposal is something that has a sense, because they say, first, let's agree on a ceasefire with no further conditions on both sides. In other words, you will not shoot at them and they will not shoot at you, period. But in 48 hours, we will resume discussions about all the conditions that will exist after that. That should include some of the Israeli demands in regard to demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, and naturally will include Hamas demands for more opening of passages, more freedom of movements of goods and people, maybe more foreign investment, maybe some other claims that are acceptable, or if not acceptable, at least they are reasonable demands. And all these discussions can and should take place first after we stop killing each other. And that's what Hamas is not ready for the time being.
You know, there are a lot of voices in Israel, not to say the majority of people, according to polls, that say that this is just another round, and if nothing really extreme happens, we're going to face another round shortly. And it seems that if there's a ceasefire anytime soon, within a couple of days, this is exactly where we're going to be.
Not necessarily. We had a very similar feeling after the second Lebanese war 8 years ago. Some people believed, because of the not very successful war, as it was perceived at that time, that the silence would last maybe a few months. And after 8 years, this border is actually a very calm border. So we do not know. But the results, or the question whether or not there will be a long period of cessation of violence or shorter period, actually depends on three matters. The first, of course, whether or not Israel will be able to dismantle, to destroy the real military capabilities that Hamas managed to produce during the past few years. And again, if more days are given to the IDF, I believe that the results will be quite satisfactory. This is number one. Number two, the question of deterrence. as it worked very effectively vis-a-vis Hezbollah, although Hezbollah made a very similar claims or announcements to what you can hear now from the leaders of Hamas. In the end of the day, the message was conveyed. And the third matter, which I believe is more important, is what is the nature of the arrangements that will be built after that.
You think disarming Hamas is something that is really tangible, could happen really in this reality?
Again, it depends how it is presented and who says what. But look, if you think a little deeper from the, let's say, international point of view, the only Israeli demand is to dismantle the rockets' ability or the arsenal of heavy weapons of Hamas. This is the only Israeli demand. Other than that, Israel can accept almost every other demand of every party, including Hamas, to expand the movement of goods in the passages, to supply more water, gasoline, electricity, to open the border between Gaza and Egypt 24/7, and even to build a small seaport in Gaza and to enable movement of goods via the sea, and of course to encourage foreign investment in Gaza. Who is against it? It might be something that if it is presented properly by the international community and by main Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and others, it will be very hard for Hamas to reject it, or at least it is a reasonable solution that if Hamas rejects it, then everybody should understand that the continuous misery of the Palestinian people in Gaza is caused not because Israel has some unbelievable expectations, but because Hamas does not agree to accept such reasonable conditions.
General Island, I thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
The world media is focused on Gaza and Israel, but maybe a little less than before. We say hello to Paul Slier. You're a journalist covering the Middle East now for Russian Today, right? Russian TV. Would you agree that maybe at this stage the world is somewhat little interested, and that might change, of course, as things change in Gaza?
Well, I certainly think that there's an attempt by the world's media, by and large, to be as objective as they can on the story. But of course, if you brought another journalist in, they might have a very different take. I mean, I can tell you from Russia Today, which is the channel I work for, they have me based in Israel and they have another correspondent based in Gaza. And their way of trying to determine if they're covering the story accurately is to give both of us the same amount of airtime. What is interesting is the way that most news channels, the language we use, we're very careful not to say terrorists. We're very careful to say if this is a conflict between Israel versus Hamas. We're very careful to attribute sources, to use direct quotes as direct quotes. But I do think that as the story progresses, and particularly the civilian count in Gaza climbs, and the pictures coming from Gaza are always stronger. So I do think that the media is tending to become more sympathetic, perhaps to the Palestinian side of the story.
And that's the story that has always been here in the Middle East. Will there ever be another layer to this story in the international media? It seems like, and maybe it's natural, it seems like many forgotten how this all started.
You know, you live here, and most of the Israeli journalists are monitoring Israeli press, where there's an understanding of what the situation is like before. For those of us who work in the foreign press, we're trying to put context, background, perspective in, for example, a television report, which is sometimes 2.5 minutes. And I can never assume that the audience that I'm doing a story for knows that much about the conflict. The last time, let's say, for example, Israel and Gaza were in the news, potentially, was when there was the last conflict, or when there's some kind of confrontation between the two sides. So we're trying to put into a 2.5 minute story as much background as we can, while at the same time reporting what's happening on that particular day. So a more direct answer to your question is I don't think there will be another layer. I think one of the shortcomings of journalism, particularly foreign journalism, is that we are so limited in terms of, let's say, television journalists, how much time we have to tell a story. And within that time, we have to tell the news and the context and the background and assume the bottom line, which is that people know very little.
Right. And the story that really caught the major headlines in the past 48 hours or so is, of course, the airplane, the Malaysian airplane that was shot down over Russian-Ukraine skies. What the heck happened there?
This is a very, very interesting story from the perspective that if you watch the Russian media, you're getting a very different take of what actually happened to if you're watching the mainstream Western media. The Russian,
American media, for that matter.
I mean, the Russians are complaining that the Americans have been very quick to firmly put the blame on Russia, and there hasn't been any conclusive proof to this extent at all. The Russian Foreign Ministry, for example, says that it has proof that the surface-to-air missile systems that were used were in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers, that these recordings that are being used to justify what happened have in no way been verified in terms of whether they happened, whether they're fake, whether they're not. At the same time, the Russians point to the fact that there were American satellite photographs that were released last month, and those satellite photographs never pointed to the fact that the pro-Russian fighters had this kind of equipment in their hands.
For a change, the argument is a little far away from here. At this stage, I'll thank you very much, Paul Slier, for coming. Thank you. What's going on underground? With us now is Colonel Atai Shelach, who was the commander of the unit responsible, among others, for fighting the tunnels in Gaza on behalf of IDF forces, of course. Thank you for joining us. How many tunnels we're talking about? How much infrastructure underneath?
First of all, we don't know how many. We know that there are many, but we don't know how many. That's first of all. And we have to take the Gaza Strip. There are 3 areas which they have an underground medium. This is the underground medium under the towns, which means Gaza, under the village, Khan Yunis, Sajaiya, and so on. This is the first. The other part is at the suburban of the town, of the village, which before the forces are coming into these towns, there are underground mediums that his target is to ability to the Hamas to fight against the IDF, against Tzahal, what we call.
Yeah.
And the second part, which is the strategic aim of Israel, are the tunnels are going through Israel that need to make a terror attack inside.
It seems that Israel was a little bit surprised that there are so many tunnels actually coming in towards the area which is on the Israeli side. Is that correct? Was this a surprise?
No, the intelligent picture through the last months before this operation, we knew very clearly what is the frame, what is the intelligent picture. And the moment that this operation, which means Suketan, began, the forces in the 3 areas, at the east, at the west, and at the north of Gaza Strip, they have a good picture what is going over there.
But experts like yourself are telling us that there's no way to exactly know and find out where are these tunnels.
It's a good question, thank you. There are 3 legs, as we said, to deal with this target. First of all, the intelligence. Secondly, operating, tactic operation. And third, it's a technological. 1 year ago, we just have operational forces that knew what to do. The intelligent picture was roughly at the beginning, if I may say, and the technologic, nothing at all. Mm-hmm. On this time, during the operation, of course, the tactical, operational, it's okay. Good forces, special units, engineering, combat engineering forces, they know what to do in every method that if you will ask, I will tell. The intelligent picture is quite well, and during this operation, as long as they will be on the ground in Gaza Strip, the picture will be much better because they will research and they will ask the terrorists that they already kept there, where are the underground medium, but the technology these days are still not enough.
Not enough. It seems also that bombing from the air is not enough. Is that correct? You have to be on the ground in order really to uncover these tunnels?
Thank you. Another good question. Yes, if you want to, as we said in the medical way, if you want to do a chirurgic act,
surgical act,
surgical act, and to make a good diagnostic over there, you must be there and must touch the ground. Because if you want to ruin tunnels or underground medium, I think it's much better described. You got to be on the ground because there is not one tunnel. It's kind of a net of a digging area and net of tunnels area. all over Gaza Strip.
Once you've discovered the tunnel, what do you do about it?
So it's combination of what is the mission and how much you want to rescue your guys. First of all, you can ruin it or bomb it with an explosive thing while you stand behind it and put. If you want to research it without get any troops inside, you will send inside robotics or other technology, which I don't want to talk about it here. But to get in the tunnels, it should be the last thing.
Option, because it's,
the last
it's
option,
a trap. It could be a trap.
Yeah, it might be a trap. So you try to avoid from this, and I think if you don't have any good reason to get in, you better walk from out. And this is the main method that the troops over there are dealing with.
Colonel Atay Shalach, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will leave you now briefly for a news update, and we'll be right back in a few minutes with the World This Week.